Let me ask you something. Did you make a promise to yourself when you were younger? A promise that your life would be totally different from your parents' lives, that you wouldn't make the same mistakes or live with the same regrets?
It's a promise almost all of us make. But then one day you're 30 or 40 and you find yourself in a situation that feels strangely familiar. You're handling stress the same way your dad did, or worrying about money just like your mother always did. And you ask yourself, how did I get here? That feeling is exactly what we're exploring today. Welcome to Sunny English Bite, the podcast that helps you improve your English while exploring ideas for a better life. I'm Sunny.
And I'm Alex. We're so glad you're here with us.
Today's episode, we're diving deep into a fascinating question. Are we destined to repeat our parents' lives, or can we rewrite the story for ourselves?
Dunny, where does this all begin? Why do we have this tendency to become like our parents?
It starts when we are very, very young. Think of a child's brain like a new computer. It has no software installed yet. From the moment we're born, our family, especially our parents, start downloading software onto our hard drive.
Downloaded software. I love that analogy. It makes so much sense. So you're saying our beliefs and behaviors are basically programs we got from our parents, like our operating system for life.
That's a great way to put it. In psychology, this is part of a concept called the family script. The theory is that we write a story for our life before we're even 7 years old, based on messages from our parents. These scripts can be about anything.
Can you give us some more examples? What does a family script look like in real life?
Of course, take money, for example. One family might have a scarcity mindset script. The parents might always say, money doesn't grow on trees, or we can't afford that. The child learns that there is never enough. As an adult, they might be very anxious about spending money, even if they have a good job.
Right, a scarcity mindset.
Another family might have an abundance mindset script. They might see money as a tool for creating good experiences. The child learns that money is a resource to be used, not feared. Then there are scripts about emotions. A common one is big boys don't cry. So a boy learns to suppress sadness, which can cause problems in his adult relationships.
That's a powerful one. You know, hearing you talk about the money script hits close to home. My dad was always very careful with money, obsessively checking every bill, worrying about small expenses. For years, I did the exact same thing. I'd feel guilty buying a cup of coffee. I finally realized I was running his financial program, not mine. I had enough money, but I was living with his anxiety.
Thank you for sharing that, Alex. That is a perfect example of running on autopilot. And it's not just what our parents say, right? It's what they do. This brings us to a crucial point, social learning theory. We learn by observing and imitating. As children, our main models are our parents.
Actions speak louder than words.
Much louder. Let me give you an example with social anxiety. Imagine a mother who wants her child to be confident. At a party, she says, "Go on, sweetie, don't be shy, go play with the other kids." But as she says this, the child sees her mother standing stiffly in the corner, nervously checking her phone and avoiding eye contact with other adults.
Oh, wow. So the child hears the words be confident, but they feel the parent's anxiety.
Exactly. The child learns that social situations are something to be feared because that's what their parents' body language is teaching them. You learn what they do, not what they say. This is why there's an old English saying, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Right. So these two ideas, the family script and social learning, create our autopilot. That brings up a big question, which I guess is our next chapter, the comfort of chaos. If our family script is negative, say about unhealthy relationships or financial struggles, why on earth would we follow it?
It's a fantastic question. The answer is surprisingly simple and a little strange. The brain prefers what is familiar over what is better, even if the familiar is painful.
The comfort of chaos. So a predictable negative situation feels safer to our brain than an unpredictable positive one.
That's it. And chaos doesn't always mean loud yelling. The original example is a home with a lot of fighting. As an adult, a calm, peaceful relationship might feel very uncomfortable, but chaos can be quiet too.
What do you mean by quiet chaos?
Imagine a home with predictable silence, a home where emotions are never discussed, where there's no affection, just emotional neglect. A child from that home might grow up and find emotionally available and expressive partners to be overwhelming or too much. They might seek out distant, unavailable partners because that emotional silence is their familiar, comfortable chaos.
That's wild. So people might unconsciously sabotage a good thing just to get back to the familiar feeling, whether it was yelling or silence.
It happens all the time. There's another psychological concept for this called repetition compulsion. It's a bit of a technical term.
Break it down for us.
Simply put, it's our unconscious mind's attempt to go back to an old, painful situation to try and fix it this time. For instance, if you had a parent who was very critical and you could never get their approval, you might find yourself drawn to critical bosses or partners.
So the unconscious hope is this time, if I work hard enough, this critical person will finally approve of me. And it'll feel like you've healed that original wound from childhood.
You've got it. But of course, it rarely works. We just repeat the pattern. This is also linked to why breaking the script can feel so difficult. Following the script, even a painful one, can feel loyal to our family. Breaking away from it can feel like a betrayal.
A betrayal. Can you say more about that? It sounds really deep.
Imagine your parents worked incredibly hard but never had much money or happiness. If you then become very successful and happy, you might feel a strange, unconscious guilt. It's almost like you're saying, my way of living is better than yours, which can feel deeply disloyal.
And that guilt could lead to self sabotage. You might turn down a great opportunity or mess up a healthy relationship to return to the familiar family pattern of struggle.
Precisely, because on an unconscious level, belonging is linked to survival. And for a child, belonging means being similar to your family.
Okay, Sunny, this has been an incredibly insightful journey. Let's try to summarize the key takeaways for everyone listening.
Let's do it. First, we talked about the family script. This is the unconscious life plan or the software that gets downloaded into our minds in early childhood. It dictates our beliefs about money, love, success, and ourselves.
Right. Then we covered social learning theory, the idea that we learn far more from watching what our parents do than from what they tell us to do. Their actions become our autopilot.
And finally, we explored why we stick to these scripts, even the painful ones, through the idea of the comfort of chaos. Our brains prefer familiar pain over unfamiliar happiness, and this is often driven by a repetition compulsion, an unconscious attempt to fix old wounds by repeating them.
So, after hearing all this, it might feel a little heavy. Where do we go from here? What's the final thought for our listeners?
The final thought is one of empowerment. The goal of this discussion is not to blame our parents, who were likely running on their own autopilot from their parents. The goal is awareness. You cannot change a pattern you do not see. Once you can see the script, you are no longer just an actor reading lines. You become the writer.
Part 2 of our special series, The Psychology of Destiny. So, in part 1, we talked about where our life destiny or patterns come from. We discussed the family script, the unwritten rules we learn as kids. We also covered social learning theory, which is how we copy the behavior of people around us.
That's right.
And you explained why we often stay in familiar but painful situations. You called it the comfort of chaos, which was a really powerful idea for me. The idea that we prefer a familiar negative situation over an unknown positive one.
That's a perfect summary, Alex. Our brains are wired for survival, and survival often means choosing the known over the unknown. But today, we're moving from the why to the how. We're talking about solutions, how to become the author of your own story.
This is what I've been waiting for. So let's start with Chapter 3, The Science of Change. Is it really possible to change these deep patterns?
It absolutely is. The first key idea here is something called differentiation of self. It sounds complicated, but the idea is simple. It's the ability to separate your own thoughts and feelings from those of your family or social group.
Okay, so it's about not just automatically reacting based on what your parents or friends would want you to do.
Exactly. It's about being able to maintain your sense of self, your own values and decisions, even when there's pressure from others to conform. It's about creating a little bit of space between their emotions and your own.
Right, so you can love your family, but you don't have to become them or repeat their mistakes. You can, as we say, break the mold.
That's the perfect expression. You break the mold. And the science that shows this is possible is called neuroplasticity. This is one of the most hopeful discoveries in modern neuroscience.
Neuroplasticity. I think I know this one. It means our brain is like plastic, it can be shaped and changed.
That's it. For a long time, we thought the adult brain was fixed. We believed that by a certain age, your personality and habits were permanent. We thought they were hardwired.
Hardwired like a computer.
Yes, but now we know that's not true. Every time you have a new thought, learn a new skill, or choose a new reaction, you are physically changing your brain. You are creating new neural pathways, like building new roads in a city. The old roads don't disappear, but if you stop using them, they become weaker, and the new roads you build become stronger and easier to travel.
Wow, so our life script isn't a permanent contract. We can actually rewrite it.
We can absolutely rewrite it, which brings us perfectly to our next chapter, Chapter 4, Practical Tools.
Okay, I'm ready. The science is hopeful, but how do we apply this in real life?
It starts with small, conscious actions. I'm going to give you 3 tools. The first, and most important, is what I call the pause.
The pause.
Yes, when you feel that old automatic emotional reaction starting, maybe it's anger when you're criticized or anxiety when you have to speak up. Your only job is to pause. Don't act, don't speak. Just take one single deep breath.
That's it?
That's it. That 1 second pause is revolutionary. It interrupts the automatic script. It's the moment you switch your brain from autopilot to manual control. In that space, you create the possibility of a different choice.
Manual control. I really like that phrase. It feels powerful.
It is. Now, the second tool works inside that pause. It's called naming the emotion.
Okay,
In that moment you've created, you silently say to yourself, "This is anger," or "I am feeling fear," or "This is shame." You just label the emotion without judgment.
why does that help?
Because studies show that the simple act of naming an emotion reduces its intensity. When you name it, you activate the thinking part of your brain, your prefrontal cortex, and that calms down the reactive emotional part of your brain, the amygdala. You are observing the feeling instead of being controlled by it.
That makes so much sense. It's like turning on a light in a dark room. You can see what's actually there.
What a beautiful way to put it. Yes, and that leads to the third tool, getting curious.
Getting curious.
Instead of judging yourself for the feeling, "I shouldn't be so angry. Why am I so anxious?" You get curious. You ask a gentle question. "I wonder why this is here," or "What is this feeling trying to tell me?"
So you treat the feeling like a messenger, not an enemy.
Precisely. Maybe that anger is telling you a boundary has been crossed. Maybe that anxiety is telling you that you're in a situation that doesn't feel safe or authentic. Curiosity opens the door to self-understanding, while judgment slams it shut.
Pause, name, get curious. It sounds simple when you lay it out, but I know it must take a lot of practice.
It does. It's a skill, like learning a new language or playing an instrument. You will forget. You will fall back into old patterns. That is part of the process. The goal isn't perfection, it's awareness. And this brings us to our final chapter, reframing the change.
Okay, chapter 5. How should we think about this journey?
Often we think of this work as fixing ourselves, as if we're broken. I want to offer a different perspective. This isn't about fixing something broken, it's about honoring yourself.
Honoring yourself. I like that.
Every time you pause, every time you acknowledge your true feelings, you're sending a powerful message to yourself. You matter. Your feelings are valid. Your needs are important. For many people who grew up with a difficult family script, this might be the first time they've ever truly felt that.
And when you do that, you're not just honoring yourself in the present moment, you're also healing the past. You're breaking those generational cycles we talked about in part one.
That is the ultimate outcome, Alex. You become what we call a cycle breaker. The pain or the pattern that was passed down through your family can stop with you. You choose a different path. You create a new legacy of emotional health for yourself and for anyone who comes after you.
That's an incredibly hopeful and empowering thought to end on. It's not about destiny being written for us, but about us having the tools to write it ourselves.
That's the truth of it. It's not easy, but it is always possible.
Before we wrap up, Sunny, let's do a more detailed final recap. I think our listeners would love a clear summary of the big ideas and the useful vocabulary from both episodes.
Of course, it all starts with recognizing we have a family script, our unconscious software. This script often keeps us in autopilot mode, reacting automatically. We stick to it because of the comfort of chaos, preferring the familiar pain over the unknown. But we can change. Differentiation is the key to separating our feelings from our family's emotional patterns. And neuroplasticity is the science that proves our brains can physically change. The practical tools to do this are the pause to interrupt the script, naming the emotion to understand it, and getting curious to learn from it without judgment.
That's a fantastic summary. And let's quickly review the key English expressions. We learned that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree means being very similar to your parents. Then break the mold, which means to do something completely different from what's expected. We contrasted autopilot mode, reacting without thinking, with taking manual control, which is making a conscious choice. We learned that hardwired means something seems fixed and unchangeable. And finally, a generational cycle, which is a pattern of behavior passed down through a family.
Exactly. So as you go about your week, I'll leave you with one question to reflect on. What is one small opportunity you have this week to press pause? And what new choice could you make in that space?
Dunny, thank you so much for this two-part series. It's been fascinating and so helpful.
It was my absolute pleasure, Alex. And thank you to everyone listening.
And a special thank you to all the Sunnies who subscribe to this channel. Let's grow together.
Join us next time for another episode. Until then, take care.